the economic analyses very carefully, and there is really no compelling results from these studies that show that PLAs cost more than projects that are done without PLAs. I luckily don't have very much time, so I can't go into all the statistical ins and outs, but the very simple models which don't isolate all the effects on PLAs do show a correlation between the use of PLAs and higher costs. When the studies get a little more sophisticated and account for the other things that might affect costs, those correlations go away, and in fact they even go away in the study that has been cited against PLAs, the cost of project labor agreements on school construction in California funded by the ABC. Even that study did go into more depth, and the results of that study show no correlation between PLA costs, PLAs and costs. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. Next witness.
My name is Owen Lei, and I am the research director at the California Construction Academy. That's a project of the UCLA Labor Center. And our work on project labor agreements and apprenticeships have been recognized by the Department of Labor and the Department of Transportation, amongst other groups. And I just want to talk a little more about our own research on project labor agreements. And they've been around for decades, with the first ones being used to build the Grand Coulee Dam and the excuse me, and the Hoover Dam. And in addition to that, they're used both in the private and public sector, as you know. And I want to talk a little bit about what PLAs really help with, which is compliance. It's not enough to have a policy. You also need ways in which to make sure that the letters of the law are being met, and PLAs really ensure this compliance. And we've done extensive research, the most recent research project being with the LAUSD School District for their PLA from 2003 to 2011. And what we found was that 48% of the dollars for construction went to small businesses. That's $4.1 billion that was able to be accessed by small contractors through this PLA. In addition to that, we also found that 41% of all of the work hours went to workers who lived local to the LAUSD school district. And in addition to that, 70% of the workers came from LA County. So PLAs really help to ensure that if public dollars are being spent, that they can be generated locally. And what that means is not just benefits for the individual businesses and those workers, but it's really for the community. There's multiplier effects when these folks go to spend money at local businesses, when they go and they invest in home ownership, and when they pay more and contribute back to the tax base, both locally and for the state. So I just want to talk about really that PLAs help you comply with the intentions of what the policy are. And in addition to that, there's a lot of multiplier effects, and they should really be kept as an option that's available both in the public and private sector. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm going to ask all other witnesses to be brief, please.
Madam Chair, members, Christy Baumer representing the California Professional Firefighters, and I would love to associate myself with the previous remarks, and just in addition, as firefighters and local governments who grapple with tight budgets, efficient expenditure of taxpayer dollars is paramount, and when all of that investment comes back to that community in the form of increased revenues, that just helps that community provide good public safety, so we're in support.
Thank you. Next witness.
Hi, my name is Lisa Hoyos. I'm with the Blue Green Alliance. We are 8 national unions and 4 national environmental groups. I'm the California director. We believe PLAs make for a really important public policy for a few key reasons I'll jump through. One is just quality work performance and assurance. 2, highly skilled and trained workforce. Middle-class jobs, which we all know are extremely important in today's economy. And finally, from an environmental perspective, we all know that the construction industry is characterized by long commutes, over 100 miles, sometimes 200 miles. And so because PLAs have local hire provisions, we can then focus on employing people in our communities. And so we're in strong support and urge your aye vote. Thank you.
Thank you. Next witness.
Sarah Flocks from the California Labor Federation in support. I just wanted to add that PLAs are also an important tool in saving the state money. It's been estimated that the underground economy costs anywhere from $6 billion to $10 billion every year. And PLAs are a very effective tool in ensuring that contractors are not misclassifying workers, that they're not violating other provisions of wage and hour law, and not creating unfair advantages above other contractors. So we strongly support this bill. Thank you.
Thank you. Next witness.
Chair, members, Rachel O'Brien on behalf of the California League of Conservation Voters. We are in support of this bill. To be brief, I can just associate myself with Mrs. Hoyos' comments on the environmental front, and thank you for your time.
Thank you. Next witness.
Cherie Cabral with the California State Building Trades Labor and Management Construction Trust. I'll be brief. One of the things I want to really dovetail onto is Councilmember McCarty's comments with regard to local control and some of the things that Cesar Diaz has pointed out. I spend the majority of my time on the local level with local electeds, going through the details of whether they choose to implement project labor agreements or not and the whys behind that. And one of the most compelling reasons is always the options that they have, whether the ability to bring back people that live in their communities under the Helmets to Hard Hats programs if they have a high number of veterans, whether to reinvest the money that's coming in the form of their taxpayer dollars, the choices to work under programs that allow them to target the children that are in their education districts for careers and other things. So I would encourage you to allow those local agencies to continue to make those decisions based on their individual needs.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, members, I will be brief. Alex Esparza on behalf of the Los Angeles City Mayor Antonio Villaraigosa here in support. Thank you.
Thank you.
Glenn Backus for the Ella Baker Center for Human Rights in support.
Thank you. Any other witnesses in support? Witnesses in opposition?
Thank you, Madam Chair, members. Julianne Broyles here on behalf of Associated Builders and Contractors of California in opposition to SB 829. There are a number of issues that I believe SB 829 brings to the attention of the legislature today. But most importantly, it's trying to tell charter cities, which occupy a unique place in the Constitution of the state, that what they can and cannot do with municipal authority over their contracting rights. We do believe that there is a long history where charter cities, and there are 120 of them throughout California, and all of them have different rules regarding their municipal affairs and that set out in their city charter. But all of them take great pride in the fact that they are set up by their voters, they are approved by their voters, and SB 829, we think, unreasonably attempts to interfere with that and on how they want to pay for local municipal projects in the future, because the bill specifically states that some or all of the projects should be awarded by the city, then state funding or financial assistance shall not be used to support any projects awarded by the city. And I think that reaches to a large degree even past what might be considered construction issues. The Constitution sets out in a couple of different places that they can set what they wish on prevailing wage or not. Some of them set prevailing wages. Some of them agree to use prevailing wages set by the state of California. Some use some percentage of prevailing wage set by the state, and others set their own. We do think that there is going to be the attempt to argue that this is a technical cleanup of SB 922 from last year. Unfortunately, that couldn't be farther from the truth. Even the analysis for SB 922 pointed out that charter cities have a unique location in setting their own rules, and I think this goes, again, beyond that. there's also been a bit of a mix-up between what is considered a voluntary and a mandatory project labor agreement. Certainly, private companies set up voluntary project labor agreements that where the contractor sets out what the agreements are and sets it up with their local unions, what those project labor agreements must contain, and that lets them decide whether to or not to hire local subcontractors that may or may not be signatory to local collective bargaining agreements. Mandatory project labor agreements, where the conditions and basically is a wraparound collective bargaining agreement, sets out that all those who are performing work on this particular project must follow whatever that collective bargaining sets out. And I think it's, again, important to note that also can set a tone where not every construction union agrees with what's being set out in that CBA. It sets for tensions on the job. It sets out that apprentices must come through the local hiring training program. It sets out that the employees used on that project labor agreement must come from the local hiring hall. All of those issues are of grave concern to the ABC members, which are the non-union contractors in California. We do think that there should be great hesitation at passing such legislation as SB 829, and sincerely think that the bill is not worthwhile to move forward and would ask for a no vote.
Thank you. Next witness.
Madam Chair, members, Richard Marcus, and I'm representing the Air Conditioning Trade Association, the Plumbing, Heating, Cooling Contractors of California, and the Western Electrical Contractors Association. And the reason that we're here today is not about PLAs. It's about the June ballot down in San Diego. There's a measure that's qualified. The proponents of the measure today have found that their arguments do not resonate with the voters in San Diego, your own constituents, Ms. Atkins, and they are failing horribly based upon the polling. And so what they're trying to do is they're trying to influence the city attorney, who will be asked to provide the title and summary for the ballot, by increasing the attention to the loss of state funding if the voters in San Diego choose to assert their right, which is their constitutional right to control city contracting, as Ms. Broyles has explained, which is the reason that Mr. Rubio is racing this measure to have it enacted before the city submits those documents. This is not about PLAs or all of the wonderful things that the supporters claim that they do. It's about casting the election in June down in San Diego. The voters in San Diego voted overwhelmingly last year by 75% to control their own resources for local projects, and this is an effort to subvert that. And finally, I do want to clarify Mr. McCarty's misstatements. The measure here in Sacramento was not thrown off the ballot, as he said. It failed to qualify. It did not fail to qualify because of fraudulent signatures. It failed to qualify because out-of-district signatures were inadvertently submitted, and it failed to reach the necessary to qualify for the ballot, but it was not thrown off by any sense of the means. This is a bad measure. It's unconstitutional, and we would urge you all to reject it.
Thank you for your testimony. Next witness.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Dave Ackerman, representing the Associated General Contractors. I bring a little different perspective to it because AGC serves as the association that negotiates master labor agreements with several unions, the operating engineers, laborers, carpenters, iron workers, etc. So we abide by those master labor agreements. We are concerned with PLAs that they supersede and attempt to go around those master labor agreements, and we abide by the labor agreements that we negotiate with our union members. PLAs, as the testimony earlier seemed to lead, is that without a PLA you have rampant no controls over a public work project. Public works projects that are being done by the jurisdictions that would be covered by this bill are under the Public Contract Code. They're required to meet DVBE, which is disabled veteran requirements. They're required to meet disadvantaged business requirements and the like. So PLAs do not bring that to the table. We already do that under our master bargaining agreements and under our concurrence with state law. We're talking about the will of the voters. When you talk about a local control, I think even Mr. Diaz in his comments opening said we're for local control. The voters are planning to vote in San Diego, and I would say there's no more local control than a local vote of the people, and we ask for your no vote on this bill. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other witnesses in opposition? Any questions from committee members? Yes, Mr. Hagman.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And there's 2 points that brought up. It seems contradictory, so I'd like either the authors or the opponents to go and both give me their points of view. When it comes to charter cities, they are constitutionally set up with their own powers, not to be conformed and set up their own destination. So how does this not conflict with the California Constitution on charter cities? And the sections they have, because I notice this is more curtailed to, this bill is toward the contract cities. So we have 100, not contract cities, I'm sorry, charter cities, 120 charter cities, including the author's charter city. I'm just wondering why is this framely focused in on this, and how, have we got a ledge council opinion? Is this even constitutional for us to even do this in the first place?
Yes, we believe it's constitutional, and the reason why it applies to the 120 charter cities, and I really appreciate Assemblyman Hagman for you bringing it up. There are 482 cities in the state of California, of which 362 are general law, and as you stated, 120 are charter cities. This particular bill will impact 2 of those 120 cities. Less than 2% will be impacted by this particular bill. Yes, it is constitutional. And in my closing, I will address some of the broader issues that have been brought forward by those in opposition as well.
Okay, so I guess
add as well.
Go ahead.
There are no current attempts to limit the ability of locally funded projects to ban PLAs. SB 922 already covers the City of San Diego's initiative, which is up in June. The argument that it is not covered, that this bill is needed for that particular initiative is baseless, it's groundless. It's for future attempts to tie the hands and disable governing bodies from their ability to consider this useful tool that can save taxpayer funds.
Mr. Hagman, you've raised a very important point. We disagree. We think it is unconstitutional. The Constitution, and there is an extensive body of case law that suggests that municipal affairs are covered under the charter city exclusion, which allows them to set their own standards. And local contracting is clearly one of the provisions that law has established is within their jurisdiction as a municipal affair. And I diametrically disagree with Mr. Diaz's comments about this because the reason that they raised 922 last year was to address this issue, and this is the follow-up. This is the follow-up that covers non-state funded projects. It's further punishment to charter cities whose voters choose to enact reasonable controls over their contracting, and that's the reason that we're seeing this bill today prior to the submission of the title and summary in San Diego.
Okay, we're going to need to move on to other comments or questions. Yes, Ms.
Really,
Atkins.
Madam Chair? Okay.
Oh, you had another question?
Yeah, if I could.
Oh, okay.
Sorry. So I'm trying to also get this. We have both arguments. This is about local control. For me, most of us come from local government. I'm trying to figure out what is more local control that our voters voted in a measure. Let's say San Diego's hypothetically does go through, and it does ban this, and for local projects, the charter city establishment allows the voters to turn around and put another ballot measure on a year later. So I'm trying to get those arguments. They're basically both saying this about local control, but they're both opposing. So I'm trying to figure out how is this more local control if the state directs a city to do it. So I want to get the opinions on that.
Sure, if I could address that. And this was brought up last year in great detail during that particular debate. And it's an issue of choice. And recalling my days on the County Board of Supervisors and your days on local government, you ought to be able to decide what's in the best cost-effective way to use taxpayer dollars. I would argue that PLAs have shown year and year again from reputable, respected economists throughout this state that PLAs are a benefit to not only the state but local government. So to have an entity that, and let's call it what it is, this is an end around to attack a collective bargaining. We've seen it in Ohio, Wisconsin, Indiana, Arizona, and New Jersey. California is no different. There are particular communities in this state that want to attack the ability for individuals to sign into a union and then negotiate and work with their local government to sign into a project labor agreement. That's what this is really about. Mr. Marksman said, Marcusum said this was really about San Diego. This isn't about San Diego. It's about the ability for individuals to join together in a union and sign a PLA agreement. And I would argue that we're going to give local governments that choice. So when you talk about local control, I would argue that this is giving the ultimate local control so that one side or the other, you wouldn't want a union passing through a 30-second commercial campaign the ability that every project has to have a PLA. That's not before you today. What we are arguing is that local government should have the choice to choose.
Thank you. Does that address your concerns? Okay, Ms. Atkins.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. You actually answered the question I was going to ask Mr. Rubio. I do want to thank you all for looking out for the city of San Diego. We appreciate that. I would say, given that you answered my question, the only comment I would give is that, you know, for state and local perspectives, I'll give you the best example of a PLA that we dealt with in San Diego County, the County Water Authority. It was an incredible project labor agreement that saved the local jurisdictions money and additionally the state. I mean, if you think about the nexus to the County Water Authority trying to maximize taxpayer dollars and the point you made about 30-second sound bites and campaigns, I mean, we followed this project. There are others I could give you in San Diego County, but again, I appreciate you bringing this forward, and I support it. And, you know, having been pointed out from the speakers related to San Diego, I felt like I had to at least respond with some of our own experiences there, having sat on the City Council when we saw the results of that PLA.
Thank you. And yet 75% of the voters in San Diego reject PLAs on the last ballot.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions? Yes, Mr. Vice Chair.
It seems to me that this really isn't a free choice at the local level because you are holding the gun of government funding other programs to the head if they don't do the PLAs. You're saying you're not going to use government funds to... No. Tell me where I'm wrong.
No, with all due respect to Assemblyman Berryhill, one, I wouldn't point a gun to anybody's head. So I don't want to use that
choice
analogy.
Of words. Okay, fair enough.
Second is this isn't forcing anybody to sign into a PLA. This is simply stating that you cannot ban PLAs in any jurisdiction in the state of California. You still have, you get to choose. If you're a local government stretching from San Diego all the way north to the furthest city or county in the state of California, you have the choice to decide whether or not you want to sign into a PLA.
Okay.
May I respond?
We're going to need to move on to other comments and questions. Mr. Allen.
So I just want to make sure I'm tracking this. The way I understand it is that essentially this doesn't compel anyone, any city, with prior legislation of this to enter into a PLA or reject a PLA.
Correct.
Essentially what it's doing is saying you can't make an a priority decision that no matter what the evidence is that you're going to ban something that's otherwise lawful. Is that a correct statement?
Correct.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions or comments? Hearing none, would you like to, oh, Mr. Ng.
Sorry, Madam Chairwoman. Just one really quick, this is a question of the opposition. I just want to be clear. Is it the opposition's contention that the state, under no circumstance, could ever ban some voter approval, potential voter approved measure? And if that's your if that's not your contention, under what circumstances would the state have the ability to do that? And if that is your contention, then
I'm certainly not a constitutional scholar, Mr. Ng, but I would say that there is substantial law that establishes the right of charter cities to control their municipal affairs. Deciding whether to ban PLAs or not clearly falls within their rights to establish and to control municipal affairs. In this case, we believe that the legislature is acting in an unconstitutional manner to restrict charter cities through the initiative process rights to control municipal affairs.
Mr. Ng, if I might also.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. In response to some of the things that have been brought up as comments on the bill, I would like to direct the committee's attention to page 2 of the bill, lines 6 through 8, where it says basically if a charter provision prohibits the consideration of a PLA, then state funding or financial assistance shall not be used to support any project awarded by the city. That is constitutional interference in Associated Builders and Contractors' view of the rights of a charter city to decide their municipal issues, and I think that's in direct contradiction to what we've heard from the proponents of the bill.
Any other comments or questions by committee members? Hearing none, Senator, would you like to close?
I would, Madam Chair. Thank you very much. And quickly, I'd be remiss if I didn't state that I'd like to offer the technical clarifying amendments to add co-authors, which I'm grateful that many of you have signed on to this important bill. And I want to clarify one point on the constitutionality issue. There's been long-standing case law that the state has the power of the purse strings. So a local government can decide they want to try to ban PLAs, but it doesn't mean they're going to necessarily get dollars for transportation funds moving into the future. Secondly, let's call this what it really is. There is a battle and a war going out in the streets today, collecting signatures all over the right to collective bargaining. It's happening in other states of this union. It's happening here in California. This is a continued effort with last year's huge accomplishment with SB 922. This is clarifying language, cementing what we meant with respect to charter cities. It impacts only 2 cities in this entire state, and I respectfully ask for your aye vote.
Thank you, Senator, and I want to thank everyone for your testimony today on this very important measure. I think I just want to point out one thing, and that is to remind the committee that the bill does not mandate the use of PLA. The bill doesn't change the ability of local jurisdiction to choose whether or not to use PLAs, correct? Correct. And so the bill is very limited to only those charter cities that have chosen to prohibit their governing bodies from even considering the use of PLAs. So I think the bill is a very simple measure that provides that state funds, whenever the state funds are used, or assistance cannot be used in those jurisdictions. And so therefore, I'll be supporting the bill today, and I'll be pleased to add on as a co-author as well.
Thank you very much.
With that, I would like to see if there's motion to move the bill. Thank you. Is there a second? Thank you. Madam Secretary, please call the roll.
Motion is due process amended to appropriations. Hayashi?
Aye.
Hayashi, aye. Berryhill? No. Berryhill, no. Allen? Aye. Allen, aye. Butler? Aye. Butler, aye. Ing? Aye. Ing, aye. Hagman? No. Hagman, no. Atkins? Aye. Atkins, aye. Ma? Aye. Ma, aye. Smythe?
6-2, that measures out.
Thank you very much.
Madam Chair, I appreciate the time that you've devoted to this issue and to the thoughtful questions for you and your
Thank
committee.
You very much. Mr. Lara, welcome. Thanks for waiting. Members, we're going to take up file item 2, AB 1612.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members. This morning I'm pleased to present AB 1612, which would increase clarity and understanding of proposed regulation by requiring agencies proposing a building standard that affects housing to explicitly cite the estimated cost of compliance and estimated potential benefits, as well as the assumptions used to reach those estimates. Over the past 30 years, state agencies' proposed regulations have been required to perform an analysis of the expected economic impact of the said regulation. These analyses are often accompanied with a statement to the effect of the agency has determined that the proposed regulation will not have a significant effect on housing. From this, it can be assumed that the agency has developed some manner of cost compliance data during their preparation of the statement, but the agency does not it is not required to cite the explicit cost of compliance figured in this public notice. The issue of using the word significant is that the term is subjective and leaves it to the agency to determine what is and what isn't significant.
Madam Chairman, the bill.
Thank you.
Rather than trying to establish exactly what the costs are in terms of significant, this bill would simply require the agency that proposes a building standard to cite the estimated cost and benefits of compliance. With me to speak in support of the bill is Sylvia Ferrari from the California Building Industry Association.
Thank you. Witnesses in support. The bill's been moved.
Good morning, Madam Chair, committee members. I'm Silvio Ferrari with the California Building Industry Association. We are the sponsors of this bill and also here in strong support. As you've already heard, AB 1612 is a measure that will require a department or an agency developing a residential building standard to specifically cite the estimated cost and benefit of compliance. What's important to say is this bill does not by any means require any agency whatsoever to do any analysis above and beyond what they're already required to do. For 30 years, agencies have already been making a determination of economic impact. And even more importantly, they've also been required to develop the facts, the evidence, the documents, and the testimony that support making a determination of economic impact. Unfortunately, over the years, nearly 100% of the regulatory proceedings result in a determination of no significant impact. And when an agency makes a determination no significant impact, they are not therefore required to provide the facts, evidence, documents, and testimony. Therein lies the problem. AB 1612, the beauty of AB 1612 is that it says to the agencies, continue doing what you're doing. Continue to make a determination of no significant impact. But right underneath that determination, just tell us what the cost and benefit is, because you're already doing it. So this is a very narrowly focused bill. It is just seeking to really improve the noticing requirement and enhance it slightly. Thank you very much for your time. We strongly urge an aye vote.
Thank you. Any other witnesses in support? Witnesses in opposition? Any questions or comments from committee members? Hearing none, the bill's been moved. Would you like to close?
Just respectfully ask for your aye vote.
Thank you. Please call the roll.
Motion is due pass to appropriations. Hayashi?
Aye.
Hayashi, aye. Berryhill? Aye. Berryhill, aye. Allen? Aye. Allen, aye. Butler? Butler, aye. Ing? Ing, aye. Hagman? Aye. Hagman, aye. Atkins? Aye. Atkins, aye. Ma? Aye. Ma, aye. Smythe? 8-0.
8-0. That measures out.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
Assembly Business Professions Committee is now adjourned.